using them? Or, I mean, what's the difference to it, I guess? I mean, it's city property. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we could, if we chose to.
I mean, if we're not gonna use the property, why keep it? It doesn't do any good. It's not an access for me, or it's not an access for emergency vehicles. It's not being used by anything.
But it
It
is,
does nothing for us, nothing. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, there's no road there per se now. There probably was back in the plot, because that was always probably the idea when it was developed years ago.
most access from behind, they have a double.
You know, any alleyway that I'm familiar with is being used currently. Everything else is just vacant land, you know, to property owners to maintain or do whatever they want to do with. But they don't own it. We do.
Mhm.
So to me, it's either put a road in and make a usable space, or give it to the property owners.
But some of them don't want it. They don't want the added expense. They don't want the expense of jumping through all the hoops to make.
Well, they might not want a road going in their backyard
Well,
either.
they might not.
So,
I just,
I mean, it's kind of
know.
one or the other. I mean, do we want to keep it, or do we want to give it up and put a road in? So.
I guess I agree with Nancy. To me, there's two issues. One is it's city property. What does the city want to do with it? We've never discussed that, because to be honest, I didn't know there was an alleyway. So we could look
Because
at
there's
whether
one-
there's an
There's
advantage.
one to the south too that I know people have talked about getting,
But there's something to do.
where there's one that runs all the way through there. So,
But given that the other property owners adjacent to the alleyway don't want it, I would move forward. Things could change in the future, and it could come back again with more people that are for it. The other alleyway, maybe people will come in and say, we want to do it. But based on what I know today, I wouldn't support abandoning it.
Well, and it's no work for the city. I mean, to my knowledge, it isn't any work for us, so there's really no harm in keeping it, from my way of looking at it.
It's just overgrown right now.
Yeah,
There's
But
nothing
it's
there.
like other people's backyards.
Not overgrown, excuse me.
Well, some places it's overgrown.
But we obviously have neighbors that don't want it to happen. I know it's worth doing it.
So do you need a motion either for or in,
Well,
for or against the
so
request?
as Jim just pointed out to me here, that if we are gonna, if someone wants to motion for this, we probably should do another meeting where we have an actual hearing. But if it's not something the council wants to do, then we don't need to have you can just make them, don't have to do anything, you just don't have to act. So if someone makes a motion to approve it, what I would say, the motion would be to hold a public hearing to abandon the alley. But if that fails, then no action is necessary. No further action is necessary.
Now, this would not fall under the category of it having to go to auction, to a vote approval and then an auction.
No, there's something separate in the charter specifically for alleys, and that process is outlined.
Just wanted to clarify.
All right. Sounds like no action. No actions, no action.
No,
Next.
Item 3D is a request by K2 Condos to add an accessible street parking space for their development. Their development is on the corner of Main and Gardner, the new condos that were built and the new houses that are on Gardner and Bay. They're asking the city to convert a parking space on Main Street or on Gardner Street in front of the building to add an accessible, and what I mean by accessible is handicap parking space. The county building department is requesting that they provide an accessible space nearest to the entrance. There are some potential grading, I won't say issues, but the grade on the property as it exists makes it a little more difficult to add in a handicap spot on the property. And I distributed a letter or an email from the county to the developer, Rob Mossberg here, explaining how they prefer to have a parking space, a handicap space on street, which is closest to the entrance. As staff, we review the request, and while I don't think any of us are really object to creating another handicap spot. We have a couple reservations, and one of them is that we already have two handicap, if we're looking at the public at large, we already have two handicap spaces just on the other corner where the Methodist church is. We have one on Gardner and one on Main Street, so it's really close to have another handicap spot. So is a need there? We're not 100% sure about that. And then the precedent that could set in the future, for example, if more buildings or, new site plan, new buildings come up, old buildings are taken down and they have new site plans and then they start requesting a similar thing. Well, can we use an on-street parking space as a handicap accessible spot? So of course, the county can't require the city to create convert one of its public spots to an accessible handicap spot. That's just not within the county's purview. Further, that's M119, so I don't think they have any jurisdiction over that road. However, if the county prefers it, it's something that, council can take into consideration, and we do have that email from the county there. If the council doesn't prefer we convert the public space into a handicap spot, there is a green belt that was on the site plan for the development for the project that when the planning commission approved it, they agreed at the time that it would be nice to have some green space as a buffer between the condo buildings and then the homes, but that green space could be converted to 4 parking spots if the city determined there was a need. And that is potentially one spot that could be used as a accessible handicap spot if the council doesn't want to go the route of putting it on Main Street or Gardner Street, and that would be up to them, the developer, to work through that. But they are requesting that the council, and by they I mean developer here, Rob Mossberg, and I'll let them speak in a little bit, but they are requesting that council consider putting that handicap spot there. I should also clarify that I'm a little hesitant to necessarily, so the county is looking for ADA compliant spots, and I'm calling ours accessible and handicap because our parking spots on Main Street really don't meet the ADA requirements fully. We really basically just have a handicap sign that reserves it for people with disabilities, but they really don't meet the standards in the ADA code. So I'm really hesitant to call them ADA spots. We do have ADA spots in some of our parking lots, obviously, but on Main, it's just hard to create an actual ADA compliant spot. But it would be there is still some better to have those ADAs, those handicap spots where that Main and Gardner intersection is, because there's better than some of the other spots for handicap parking. So Rob, if you want to just maybe talk a little bit more about anything that I didn't.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, the overview was a really good one. I mean, we're happy to accommodate that space on property. It's just as we got looking at it, they were reserved for this purpose, so we could go to the Greenbelt area and put in a space, and things would be fine. We just didn't necessarily think that was ideal, especially when you consider that on-site parking is it's not really open to the public. I mean, it's for residents and employees of the building. So in terms of usage by our kind of handicap community, we and the county just thought it might be better if it'd be out front. And going way back to kind of the approval process, which you all were 10 years old when this happened, that space out front in the Hotel Janelle days was going to be used as a loading zone. And I think when we were in the early stages of this approval, you notice there's no approved handicap space on the site plan already. I think we all talked about it as a city and developer and said that, that space on Main might work if it came down to it. So, but we all can't find any kind of proof or specific evidence of that. So we're not 100% sure. So, but Victor's exactly right. I mean, we can accommodate it on site. We personally just thought it'd be better used for the public and the handicap public if it was on Main Street or Gardner.
Yeah, and to add to Rob's point, when I met with the building official, the means of egress using the church spots that Victor just had up, there was some concern crossing the street at the double crosswalk there, and there could be a lawsuit with that if somebody got hit, especially during the summer months when it is so busy. And it kind of allots for more of a access to that south side of the street on Main. if we
And
have-
they're, and the state code and the code they follow says, kind of the nearest possible entry point. So they are making some kind of a call and saying, yeah, it'd be preferred, the closer the better is essentially what they're saying. So
Mhm.
happy to answer questions.
Any public comment on our? Whatever.
How many spots are we looking for? Two, one?
One Main or Gardner. And I do, Rob, I do have a question. And the one on Gardner, I know the counties, they were concerned about even on site here because of the grading work that might, because it kind of slopes eastward. But I think that same issue you would have probably on Gardner as well, because Gardner slopes a little bit too. So I think ideally from our standpoint, I think probably Main Street would be better than Gardner for a handicap.
Well, and also if we're inclined, which I think we are generally to, kind of special spaces or reserve spaces or not as often used spaces to be pulled off of corners, too, or intersections. Might make more sense since Main's, of course, more heavily traveled.
Yeah, and towards the north end of Gardner there, the slope is more accommodating for that. ADA code lists 1 foot for every 12 feet, or a 2% grade. So it's well below that at where Gardner rounds off in the main.
So just kind of ask a quick question. The one on Gardner then would be compliant if
Yes.
we were to put it on Gardner
Yes, sir.
compared to putting it on Main?
That's my thoughts. That we were gonna do this, be that first spot off of Main on the right,
I would agree.
that first parking
I
spot.
didn't realize that was an option. I would.
But I'm kind of entailed that if we give one up on the, because I'm not opposed, I watched actually a lot of older or elderly people at the movies on Sunday. So I'm not opposed to actually, maybe putting another handicap spot right there, but is it possible for you to put one on property in that green spot, for your residents? So kind of we give up a spot in the city, can you put one on property? So actually, it's kind of give one, take one type
Just
thing.
to add another spot, period, for anybody to use.
No, more, we would get one, so you'd actually be getting two, but if we're gonna make a special spot on Gardner Street, is it possible for you guys to make one in the green space?
Yeah, sure, we can, we can.
Kind of
do
give and
that.
take, give and take, so to
Yeah,
speak.
no, but definitely understand that.
I was looking at your site plan with those two garages right there, and I know they got all their utilities in right there. Be a good spot to maybe stick one at the end of that walkway.
Well, and like I said, someday we obviously have the right, you wanted us to, the commission and council wanted us to put 4 spaces in there if we need it. The current residents, I'm sure, are pretty excited about having that buffer there. But if that's something that you'd like to do, we could definitely consider that.
What would be the, I guess, the point of having them put one on there?
Well, one, it usable for the city, on the corner, the movie theater, downtown, restaurants, different things like that, or for the businesses right there. But if they have one around back, if they get residents, that are there and stuff like that, they have one on property for the residents. It's not always gonna take up that spot. So it's kind of a,
Give them the commercial spaces if they had a handicap customer, they could direct them to the back.
And that's the thing too, man. That, the idea of just a walk up or a drive up handicap customer, pulling around back to use it, it's probably not,
right.
but if they would call ahead or something, of course, then we could accommodate them. So that's why usability on Main or Gardner would seem to make more sense.
Chief, we've run into the issue, I think you mentioned that sometimes people use handicap spots as their permanent.
We have one at the corner right by Berkshire that's continues to use by a tenant above.
So yeah, there is a possibility that, if you do have a resident that moves in that's, needs this handicap or needs something ADA, that they could end up just using that, occupying that public space.
I'd say in that case, then the association probably would be aware of that fact and would probably try to accommodate them on property, and we'd probably come to you at that point and say, hey, shouldn't we take one of those spaces and use it for a resident?
Because I honestly don't know the enforceability of a handicap spot in that's actually the association's property. So I don't know if we could go in there and enforce a handicap spot, right or wrong. Be like having one on your driveway.
Are we talking about a handicapped spot for a resident in there or for someone who's gonna use the lower level
Yeah.
and stop by? I'm a little confused.
Public.
It's public.
Public, but if you had a
I-
handicapped resident, they might feel it was their permanent parking spot.
I mean, that happens everywhere, all over town.
Right.
But then at that
So
point.
you've got one.
There's one behind,
Go in the back.
yeah, there's one behind the New York, like, there's a handicap spot and people think that's their permanent parking
Yeah.
spot.
Car's been there for a month.
Yeah, I don't want to cause too much complication, but I mean, if that were of a concern, if we got a handicapped resident, I think, you might even want to ask us to come in and talk to you about.
I
doing
mean,
that.
if you have a handicap resident, I think you need to accommodate them in your own property and not the city. Sorry.
Yeah. Why not?
No, so
One in right
to-
now.
To clarify, code wise, residential isn't required to have an ADA compliant spot, but given the circumstance, we do have a resident who does need wheelchair accessibility. There's accommodations that can be made. They each have access through a garage. We can put in a small ramp to step up into the building that way. And once they're in, there's, clear means of egress to an elevator. to get
Building
up to-
complies once you get in.
What about for an employee? who
Right.
might
But
be-
it's,
Same.
Yeah.
really, yeah.
So
Yeah.
wouldn't it make more sense to just go ahead and put it on property at this point and not have the city give up a parking spot just to put a ADA compliant on property? And that would fulfill your requirement, correct? I mean, of what you have to do for your office space down below.
the city gave up 3 spaces for that establishment.
Well,
But that wouldn't be public then at that point.
yeah.
Right, but like the city gave up 3 parking spots for that and the space next to it. As parking spaces, the city gave up 3 parking spaces.
Curb cuts.
And now you're asking for more.
City
Like,
getting
that's all I'm saying. Like, the city has already given up 3 parking spaces for you guys and the house in front of you.
Or easement into the
into their property,
driveway.
into their driveway.
The driveways,
Yeah.
3 parking spaces have been taken up.
Could we take one of the ones from in front of the Methodist church and move it?
Well,
the
that's
top of
the other
Gardner
thing.
Street.
We specifically, I believe, got requests from the Methodist Church at that time because they have a lot of.
I was gonna say, they have a lot
Yeah,
of.
they have-
people, and so that's,
They can use.
and that's the, that's the precedent that
Yeah.
we set.
How many handicap spaces are in the main street from Gardner to Spring?
I have that map right here with these yellow pins are kind of showing, so this is, the map is upside down, but here is State Street and this is Main Street. So here's, you have one on this, inside the Spring Street lot, right there. Then you have one in the city lot by the Methodist Church, and then you have one on these 2 by the Methodist Church right here.
So there's. quite a
There's
few
3 right there on the
al-
corner.
Already, that are the city. I just think it makes more sense to put it on property. But the- Myself.
I guess from the request aside, the way I look at it is we don't have any handicap properties on Main Street from Gardner to Spring, none.
Handicap spaces.
They have 2 spaces right across the street from where they're asking.
No, I understand that, but the request aside, just looking at the big picture,
Mhm.
somebody needs a handicap spot down by the church because they want to go to Grand Real Estate or the paper station. That's a bit
There's
of a
one right
burden.
by the bookstore.
Yeah, the other ones are by state, Main and State.
Main and State, right on the corner.
By the post office. So yeah, there are none.
There's nothing in
There's nothing.
I see what.
downtown.
Different.
Somebody wants to go to church on that side of the street, there's no handicap spots on that south side of the street.
I guess I would, I mean, that's one way to view it, but I don't know if viewing it
This
as.
is a
taking
state highway
away-
where the speed limit is 30 miles an hour.
Right, I don't know if taking away.
I don't know.
a Parking spot from the city is.
I think taking away a parking spot from the city is a really big deal.
If we keep getting nickel and dimed on these parking spots.
I think it's a really big deal.
And if we keep losing them, we won't have any parking left.
Jeff, do you know, I mean, or Chief, so for what Councilwoman Melky was talking about, there was 2 spots lost when the project happened, then we just lost 1 more recently on Gardner Street, right?
I think there's 3 spots lost right there.
I think it
All
was
where the
recent-
driveways were,
Yeah, but the driveways
Yeah.
were created, yeah.
or are.
Yeah, the curb cuts.
So there were street parking there, so that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Um,
3,
Were they all on Gardner Street or
Yes.
they were all on?
I
Gardner?
guess. I mean, I think that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
May I
project.
ask
Kathy.
a question?
Oh,
yeah.
Kathy Marshall, Sargent Street. Is there a standard or a requirement for downtown of a certain size and how many handicap parking? No,
No.
spaces there's supposed to be?
The county thinks that there is.
Okay.
That's the county, right?
Yeah, we don't have any, there's no requirements for how.
Right, but the county is requiring.
No, in this case, the county is asking, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The county prefers it on the street as opposed to on their. on their
And the
property.
county, I'm sorry, maybe this is a really stupid question, but the county is asking for a handicap parking space. Why?
Yeah, but just because why is the county?
So since we built from the ground up, it wasn't a alteration or renovation on a existing building, which would then be grandfathered in on the code. We have to, I mean, given our occupation load in the building, have to allot 1 spot for an accessible van parking for the commercial spaces below.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's a
new
requirement
codes.
for the commercial spaces below.
Yes, sir.
Codes are ever changing.
That's what I mean.
So they won't sign off on it until.
Yeah, we cannot obtain a certificate of occupancy.
My favorite words. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know, I kind of like, I would push for the give and take. If they put one on site, I wouldn't mind seeing one on Gardner Street, honestly. After, all the amount of people we got in town, all the businesses down that end, the movie theater, whatever businesses they have here. Turkeys and different things like that. I think that one parking spot's not gonna kill anything. Hell, for me to go to the movies, I had to park by Judge Street and walk down Sunday. So I mean, with the movie theater, there's a lot of things that go on at that end of town.
So, but to help them fulfill their requirement, which is what I think we're talking about at this point. I agree there should maybe be some more handicap spots in there, but for them to fulfill their requirement, I think if they put one on site, that would then give them their certificate of occupancy.
Especially if it's in support of the commercial spaces within the building.
And then we can decide, we or whoever gets to decide if we need more handicap spots, we can do that.
So there was,
separately.
again, these discussions can be very educational. If we were gonna add one, I don't know that I'd add it on the corner
Yeah.
opposite of 2 or 3 others. I'd put it down more towards the middle.
In the middle of the
Yeah.
To
town.
get a
Yeah.
broader access to the rest of the businesses
Yeah.
in town.
That's something that we may want to do as city staff in the future is actually
Right.
examine our downtown. and-
Yes. you
Can
were-
I ask a
Yeah,
question? Like, Gunner Rob, if we were to put one, let's say, the alley that goes back behind Turkey sort of, if we were to put one in the first spot around there, would that suffice? You know what I'm saying? 'Cause
What's the radius we need?
To the
Yeah.
benefit of that, actually,
It's a
a
good
spot in the
question.
middle of that block, there's a cut, a driveway cut there.
Yep.
And that first spot would be ideal for a handicap spot.
It's a great question.
You pointed out on the
I was gonna say,
That
that
way,
would show
yeah.
where.
It's a block away.
We could ask. My sense is that Joe's probably gonna say, yeah, no, the closest possible to the front door.
Well, but if the city says that that's the one that's available, that would be the closest possible.
Yeah.
Well, the city could say, no, thank you, and we put it on our property and we go our separate ways, so. that's an option.
Kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because if that did count, then we would really kind of do two things at once. We'd add one for the benefit of the downtown, not exclusively to the commercial use. So you get what you need and we get a parking space where it actually might be needed. To me, that would be worth asking the county if they would accommodate that as a response to their request.
I think just from speaking with Joe Richardson on this matter quite a bit, that would be too far of a egress route for that space, so it wouldn't necessarily.
Maybe it's a question that goes to Marty.
Marty's pretty involved. He's just not.
I'm just saying, well, again, they've asked us, it would be difficult and it would be, appreciated and all that. Well, let's continue the discussion.
Not the property.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it easy.
I mean, that would be mine.
There's actually, I think it like, I'm looking at Google Earth here, and if it went right in front of Turkey's,
It's not that.
that's like, it's just as close as having it on Gardner.
That driveway access,
Yeah.
If I'm looking at the picture, right in front of Turkey.
Yeah.
Turkey might.
right next to their garden, right next to
Or
their
the
outdoor garden.
outside,
Is that where, oh,
There was
The old
spots-
walls from the ship store, right there.
I think
That's
there
where the
is,
bicycle shop is.
I think there's a spot, like there's a driveway cut.
That I don't
Looking at the
know what's in
picture.
there.
Yeah.
There's a driveway cut that goes in there.
That's the
I-
Williams house.
mhm.
Yes.
Go ask.
And to me, I mean, it's no further away. Yeah, it's not at the corner, but it would make more sense and it.
Well, it makes more sense for downtown business.
It's also a
Absolutely.
straight shot.
That way the city's not doing something specifically for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah. I
because
like
that's
that.
a little bit of a bad thing if we do it specifically for you guys right in front of your building. I'm struggling with that a little
Well,
bit.
we need to watch setting a precedent.
We do,
Come back
yeah.
and bite some future
So-
council.
I would ask them if we put it wherever they're saying, in front of Turkey's, if that was close enough.
So to clarify, there is a curb cut there for them to,
Yeah, the next building over,
okay.
to the west,
Alright.
there's a driveway access right there.
Yeah,
It would be the one, be the slot to the east. So we,
Past the bike shop.
right.
we'll be right in front of the bike shop.
Yeah.
That's right. That's pretty
Yeah.
close.
Yeah, that's good.
It's also not down around the corner.
That would be the
Or on a
compromise.
hill. So
Just
that
the
might
other
be
end
a
of the
plus.
property.
That might be a plus.
So about
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to look at putting the handicap access in front of the bike shop as we know it on Main Street. To accommodate not only the city, but
Fulfilling their
fulfilling
requirement.
Their requirement.
the requirements.
And if that is, sorry to interrupt you, we're finished. I'm sorry.
You're
I was just gonna suggest if then the county says that's okay, could we potentially administratively just kind of go ahead without coming back in a few weeks?
If it gets approved, yeah, that's what we're saying.
Okay, okay,
yeah.
Yeah, if the county approves
If
it.
the county says
Yeah.
okay,
okay, thank you.
And if the county says no, then it goes on their
then
property.
it should go on site.
And it goes on site, yeah,
If they won't let you do it.
Okay,
yeah.
appreciate it.
Do we need a second? I'll second that.
John Cox,
Yes.
Matt McGarrett,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Yes, motion carried.
So that'll work out for everybody.
Thanks for the discussion.
Okay, item 3C, the Jervis B. Webb lease discussion. So really, this is about, from last council meeting, we discussed how Jervis B. Webb, which leases property from the city next to the airport. In that lease agreement, which is, they're exercising their option to get out of that agreement. And part of that process is that they have the right to purchase the city property. So the vacant land. So they built, as a recap, they built the building back 1980s on that portion of city property, which is, that building is also on county property as well as on city property. So part of that process to purchase that land requires this to go to a vote of the people and at the ballot. So in November, council's agreed to put on the ballot because that's, we're kind of bound by what the lease agreement says. To put a question on the ballot, asking the voters whether or not they want to sell this land. And if 60% of the voters who vote on that day say yes, then it goes to auction. So then we have a public auction and we are authorized to sell to the highest bidder, but Jervis B. Webb has an option to match that highest bidder. If for some reason it fails, that vote fails, then essentially what happens here is the city could basically say, well, what the lease agreement says is basically that, the city gets that property back. The city can buy the property with improvements. Sorry, we own the property, but we could buy the building approved. We can pay for the improvements to it and own that portion of the building. Or Jervis B. Webb has to give us the property back as if it was in its unimproved condition. But it's a little complicated too, because that building straddles also on the county land too. So ideally for Jervis B. Webb, they would want to keep that building and use it for something else or sell it to someone who actually wants to inhabit or use that building. So that's where we're at right now. And this purpose of this meeting is to approve the language that's going to go on the ballot. Jim Raymer crafted some language. We do have Michael Farley, who is representative of Jervis B. Webb, here to maybe answer any questions if you have any. But I also want to say that the ballot language, we're waiting on one thing, and the lease basically says Jervis B. Webb and the city both get separate appraisals, and the average of those appraisals will be the minimum sale price of the property. So Jervis B. Webb already got an appraisal for just the land without the building on it, and just the land alone. Their appraisal came back at $420,000. We are still waiting on our appraisal. We signed with them a few weeks ago, and hopefully we'll get that appraisal back soon. But we figured that, once we get that appraisal, if council can approve this language and we can just combine our number with their number to get that average, that minimum sale bid. So this has to go, if we want to get a November ballot, we have to early August, and it has to get this approved over to the county. So that's why we're coming now, and hopefully we can settle this now. So that way we're not rushing for a special meeting in early August to try to get this language over to the county. You see the language is on your screen. It's pretty standard, but there's some, caveats there, trying to emphasize to the public that, the sale does not include the actual improvements of the land, of the building, just the land. So that some people might be confused when they initially see that. They're like, oh, it should be a lot more than $420,000 or so, but we're talking just about the land, not the building. If someone else, for example, bids higher and Jervis B. Webb doesn't want to match their bid, then we have to talk about.
Is there a way to describe that it's strictly basically the parking lots of that in this description, or not really?
What is it, John?
Well,
This is the spot we're talking about.
most
So
people
John is
look
saying
and
it's
say
mostly
it's
this
Jervis B. Webb property, but most people aren't gonna realize that the city owns basically south of the park and the main parking lot. They're gonna think of the building and stuff like that. So is there any way to describe it as, the field and the parking lot, not the building per se?
It's really hard because part of the building is on it. See, if you look at.
Well, I know the bottom, yeah.
You know,
they
right
built
there.
that years ago,
Maybe
but-
if we emphasize, maybe we even have a picture
I was gonna say, can
in
we
here.
put a
That's the way to
picture?
do it.
With the
I-
outline.
A picture, yes, that'd be
And
worth it.
and when, it's not part of the ballot language, but certainly is informative to people who are interested.
Yeah.
As to what they'd actually be bidding on.
Right.
So just like with
Well,
our
and-
other ballot proposals, we would put a package together on the website, a presentation that shows exactly what's happening, because I don't think you can have a picture on the ballot. of
Not in the
something.
ballot, but can you put it out there, or could you put it in newspaper? When you
Put
were
website,
spreading it?
Facebook,
Maybe even refer to it. maybe
Yeah, it's-
Yep.
better than refer
it
to
is. It's just-
Parking lot areas.
Yep.
And we are asking for, well, because there is an easement to access, and we want to make that clear as well, the airport. So this road right here, you see in the map, I'm pointing to with the hand, that goes toward the airport, and this yellow dotted line as well, the city would retain that as.
That's a permanent easement.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can have access.
It actually is not an easement right now, so we
Yeah.
need to
Oh, yeah,
reserve
yeah.
it. And so that's been understood.
Because we own the property.
We need
We own the
that.
property,
We
yes,
own the
right.
Yeah.
We own the property. So it's next to that.
And just a point of clarification, if the voters say no, then we get the property back, but that would be at the end terminus of the lease.
Yes,
It wouldn't be immediate.
correct. And that's 2025 that ends.
Again, another possible point of confusion.
You have, Mayor, if you just want to open up to the public, we do have some questions.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. No matter what happens with the property, whoever buys it or owns it or leases or anything, will the bike path still stay there where it is right now?
Yes, yes.
Yay, I spend a lot of time back and forth on that bike path. Thank you.
It's too bad more people don't use it.
I've left a lot of tire rubber on that bike path.
Any other public comment?
I just have a question for clarification, because they want to sell it, we have to sell it. I mean, why are we in this position?
So because of the way the lease was written,
That's right.
the lease calls for this, and the difference, again, I'll emphasize, if it comes back to us, we are probably not gonna purchase the improved building, we probably just want it back as an empty lot, so by them, Jervis B. Webb purchasing it, they don't have to take down the building, and they can sell the whole building as one. And they probably also are gonna want to, and Mike, I don't wanna speak on your behalf, but probably combine the two properties with the county and the city portion together, because right now they're two separate properties, and it's really hard to make a sale of two separate properties.
And this lease was written in 85, wasn't it?
Yeah, 85
If I
86,
remember,
yeah,
a long,
yeah.
yeah, a long time
The county lease is older, but the lease with the city was 1985.
Right, right.
And yes, we're talking to the county about also purchasing the county property.
And that lease was super specific of what the city has to do at the end of the lease.
Yes.
It had all sorts of things in it.
May I ask if 3/5 of the voters don't approve, then is that the end of it, or can it go on the ballot again?
That would be up to council, but Jim, how long is it before a ballot initiative fails before it can go back on the ballot?
Well, this is not really a ballot initiative. This is something the council has proposed. So I don't know that there's a necessary period of time before it would go back on, but it would be, whether council would want to do that or not, I don't know. It's made an effort. I don't believe it would have an obligation to do it.
The city obviously has sold other property this way where it gets approved by a vote, right? Do those votes usually pass?
Sometimes they don't.
I would think most people wouldn't really care, but I don't know.
Well, right now, we're not too interested in giving up property, so. And that's pretty good property for a lot of different things right there, obviously.
Well, and it's contiguous to a lot of other property we have. It's not, we have almost 100 acres out there. if I'm not mistaken. 91, 94.
Yeah, it's part of a larger.
It's part of a much larger piece, yeah.
On the finance side of this, I would assume everything working in the favor of Jervis. That property, all part parcel, county, city combined, would then you would sell it. Jervis B. Webb planned to sell it. So at that point, then maybe the city would have an option to retain that property and lease it to the new owners, something to that effect. Rather than making Jervis tear it down or trying to put it back on the ballot. I mean, there's got to be alternatives, worst case scenario if this doesn't pass.
Yeah, it could just continue on the way it is now.
And this is a negative part of this. I need it means to go on the ballot, but we need to think. What if?
Absolutely. But at least the city retains ownership and control.
Stone Light Industrial, right? We looked this up. Stone Light Industrial right now. Right now, that's what it's on.
But for what we're trying to do here, I refer to what obviously Jim has drummed up here. I mean, legal verbiage and stuff like that.
We don't have much of a choice.
No.
Yeah. We have to do what we have to do.
I'd make a motion to approve this and we'll deal with it later.
I'll
Or
second it.
You guys will.
With the understanding that the numbers will get filled in.
Right.
Once you have the appraisal.
We have a motion and a second. John Cops,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Matt Rivera,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
Motion carried, and this will get, once we get the final figure, it will go to the county. I believe August 1st is my deadline or so about, so then it'll be on the November ballot.
May I ask one more question? Is it okay if we market the property? Obviously, we can't close on any sale until that's approved, but I mean, can we put a for sale sign in front of it or?
I wouldn't think so until it's your property. I don't know legally, Jim.
Well, what is our legal aspect if we're interested in keeping it, the property as it's currently sets with lease agreements? Can there be some stipulations in their sale provisions? Regardless of the vote?
I don't know. I mean, let me just go back to Mike's question. You can market the property, but you're taking a risk when you do that because you don't own it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but putting a sign out there might be a little bit of a, at least on the city portion, you've got a different deal with the county.
Yep.
They have to sell to you.
I think it's still subject to county approval.
Okay.
I think having a for sale sign on the city portion would be misleading, because perhaps maybe when if it gets approved and goes to auction, that might be an opportunity to put a for sale, because then it would be,
Well, then it's really for sale.
then it's for sale.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, I think it's kind of premature to. put a
Well,
for
again,
sale
that
sign.
kind of boils down to where we need to make people aware that
It's just the land.
it's just well, more or less, 90% of the land.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that, but that's just my suggestion.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, item 3D, there's a request for temporary housing on 803 Harrison Street. So Beverly Women West's house burnt down, and obviously is no longer habitable, caught fire. The insurance company is paying to rebuild the house, but they're also paying some money for her to have temporary housing while the house gets built. However, there's a lack of housing, and it's lack of affordable housing for her. So it's a more reasonable alternative financially is to temporarily put an RV or trailer on the property to stay there while the house is being rebuilt. And they expect the house to be done by mid-November. Problem is, our zoning code doesn't permit RVs or trailers to be stored on properties unless there's a dwelling already in the property, but further also, trailers can only be hooked up to sanitary facilities and mobile home parks. So we don't have an allowance for someone to live in a trailer RV on the property unless it's a mobile home park. So they're asking for an exception, temporary exceptions that she can live there during the construction of the home. As mentioned, our zoning code doesn't have any exceptions. I've seen in other communities that do have exceptions for, what they call acts of God, extreme weather events, tornadoes, fires like this. So they do allow us a zoning code, but that would require a zoning code update, which we are going through, but that's something to consider in the future. But in this specific request, they're asking for that exception. And, if council were to go down this route to allow it, I would say that, council puts a firm deadline on it, on when they can stay in the trailer, on the property. They said mid-November is when they expect to be done. So, my opinion would be to the end of 2023, would be a fine deadline. They also noted that they won't rent it out to anyone after the house is built, which is per our rules, not allowed anyway.
Public comment?
Yes, Nichols, that's 38 Westbrook Drive. I think we should let, I mean, yeah. Come on, man, I got a house fire. It's pretty rough.
Back row there.
Monique, State Farmer insured. She does have a budget. So if it does go past the end of the year, like we're suggesting, we can put her in a hotel and it will take her through Del Spring. It's just, there's not enough.
to do it until spring next year.
I think,
Have we received any?
Sorry. I'm sorry, Catherine Montiel, Sergeant Street. Do we have a mechanism in place to enforce this? I mean, I agree with Lisa, but is there a mechanism to enforce it? That's, would be my concern.
So the length of the stay.
Correct.
So if council puts a time expiration, then we do have a mechanism, and that would be, it's no longer permitted in our zoning code. It would be just like any other zoning violation. And that would be a ticket. Fine, penalty. Yeah. I don't know if Jeff, typically you send a letter that they have to leave the premises and then.
Yeah, absolutely. If with any other zoning violation, there would first be a letter notifying them of the issue, asking them to resolve it. And failure to do so, then we would send another one officially saying you're in violation and how we will proceed from there.
Monique, have they signed off on everything? So they're proceeding with,
Not yet, because we're waiting on this.
Did we receive any correspondence from any of the neighbors? I mean, this affects them most directly. Were they?
No, I was
were-
just told that we needed to contact city council.
Were any of the neighbors notified?
We did not send out any notification to surrounding property owners. Basically, Monique contacted me, informed me of the issue, and I recommended that there was nothing I could do with the zoning code, but that Victor might be able to come to city council and that you might be able to do something if appropriate. We could certainly do a notice of a public hearing to discuss, to see what neighbors feel.
The reason we didn't do that in the sense of putting a ZBA, because there wasn't really anything to.
Well, and going to the ZBA and asking for a variance, that stays with the property in perpetuity. We lack the ability to stay for a duration. I could be wrong on that.
The other opportunity is for you to deny that and then to appeal that to the ZBA.
Well, no, I'm not talking about that level of formality.
That's when
but-
we notice of hearings, and neighbors get contacted.
But a courtesy letter to let them know that this is being considered, because again, it's gonna affect them from now until November. That's if the construction gets done, and it's quite likely it would slip. Do we have any information about where the RV or the trailer would be? Would it be in the front yard? Would it be in the backyard?
I believe in her driveway, in front of the garage.
in front of the garage. What about the sanitation?
That's.
I mean, it's one of those things where she can be able to take it somewhere and obviously take care of it. Yeah. Carol?
Did she hook up to water and electricity on her house? She able to get to the utilities?
Should be able to. That
I
part,
believe so. I
that
believe
part
there's a
wasn't-
temporary pool in right now.
that part wasn't destroyed in the fire.
But then once it freezes, your water access, I mean, it could get complicated once things get cold. And again,
We're
more about
talking
safety,
we're talking 4 months.
if they get done on time.
If they
Well,
don't
but
get
that's
that,
our
then they-
stipulation.
Yeah, then they leave.
Wow.
Then there's the option out. So I would say December 1st.
Carol Woodard, 141 Snyder Street. I think given that people can put big boats in their driveways all summer, and if somebody's trying to rebuild their house in town, I would be supportive of them having an RV in there through November, December.
I think we want to help out. I mean, it's certainly a tragic situation. I just want to make sure that all of the questions and concerns are talked about before we say yes. And again, from the neighbor's standpoint, I'm a little,
There should be a deadline.
I'm a little concerned. But yeah, if it has a deadline on it and we want to help out, I think anybody else on the block or in the city, if they have the same situation, would want to see the same level of support.
So a deadline, I'm also hearing potentially another condition to send out a letter to neighbors informing them that it will happen, and that if there is a deadline.
You like to be treated, you know, you like to treat people the way you want to be treated. Harvey's gonna stand up and she's gonna start living in it.
I live on 402 Prairie Street. I mentioned that before, which this is a block over from me. And I have a lot of compassion for this family. I knew them and I have a lot of compassion. But what I didn't like about it is I saw this on, I came down to look at the agenda that was posted out
Mhm.
here. And I didn't even know this was being brought up. So what you say, it doesn't bother me. I'm a block or two over from this. But the immediate neighbors, I just don't know if they are aware. So that's the type of issues you might be. And I don't know that any of them would be, but.
Exactly, we don't
I
know.
think a letter, if we agree to do it with a deadline, just a letter telling them that this is what was done and why we've
Before,
done it.
yeah.
And
before
there
it
is
goes
a
in.
and there is a deadline to it, so they know it's for a period of
So
months.
December 1 makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think we have to ask them, but I think if we let them know, that would be considerate.
No, we're kind of past asking them, just need to move forward.
Right.
Be a motion or?
Yeah, so I'll make a motion that we allow the motor home to stay until December 1st and that we send a letter to the surrounding neighbors.
Second.
I have a question. With all the problems with getting workers and construction done, what if construction people can't get it done in time?
Then she'll have-
Talk to that
That's what
lady.
I would be concerned about.
Talk to that lady right behind you.
Yeah, the construction company has these people already on standby to start immediately as soon as we get approved.
You need to talk to them.
And I think as he said that after December 1st, they will find.
Then they can
housing.
find somebody.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, I think we got it covered.
Plus, it's gonna be cold.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. John Cox.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yeah.
Matt Langera.
Yes.
David Melky.
Yes,
Motion carried.
thank you.
I hope it goes fast. Get it done.
All right, item 3E is Chief Knight will update council on the open police officer position and discuss options to fill that role. Matt Howell resigned, was it about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? Yeah, about a month ago. And we had information for the packet on Friday, but we did send you an email this morning with a memo from Chief Knight describing the options and he'll present it right now.
So you received my letter. We're just having a hard time fulfilling that position as well as every other agency in the state. I just had a meeting or a conference and there's agencies that are 30 short downstate. You saw the signing bonus that some agencies have allowed. Petoskey just had an opening as well. The county's still trying to fulfill their openings. So we're struggling. We have some people that have applied. We've just completed some interviews and 2 of these individuals need to be sponsored through the academy. And there's one in Kirkland, there's one in Traverse City, and I'm sorry to like push this or try to get this through, but their academy starts August 8th. And so this public safety awareness assistant program, academy assistant program allows us to recoup $24,000 from the state. They've allocated 8 million and, 20 million and only 8 million have been used so far. So I feel that we should recoup 24,000. The only concern I have is it may go over as stated in my letter, but no more than I believe $5,000. And the money that we're recouping because of officer house resignation till the end of the year, I feel that would cover that $5,000. So I'm not saying this is a road I want to take, and I'm not saying this is a road I have to take right now. The deadline's due the 19th, 2 more days. I actually have a meeting a little bit with somebody across the street that potentially could be interested in our position. But if I need to go down that, I need to commit to the academy. I'm going down to the academy in Kirkland tomorrow to meet with Teresa Feldhauser to discuss this with her. And I just wanted to have that as an option if I need to go that way.
Can you just quickly cover, so if you move forward with this plan, you'd identify an individual and then the city would then pay for this individual to go through the academy?
Correct.
Which takes how long?
He would starts August 8th, completes December 14th.
Okay.
And so the academy would be done the 14th. We still have that training period where we have to train them in-house. So we're actually going to be short till probably around February or March. It's going to be, we talked about it. It's quite a time, once Tyler Swiss goes back to school, we're going to be very short. Tyler Swiss and summer is ours because of our contract with the schools. But once he goes back to the schools, we're going to be basically 4 of us. We understand that. It's sort of one of those things, there's people out there that could potentially start, they say October, but I always feel like I want to have that person fit within our organization and our, And so I'm looking at that avenue. The two individuals that we interviewed in here, both of them I feel would do that. There's one individual out there that may potentially do that license, they call it license or licensable, but I'd like to get the best person for our position.
And so, and Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but this program, so if we sponsor them through the academy, I believe Chief said that they have to stick with the city 4 years. Otherwise, if they leave before 4 years, then they have to pay us the money back that.
Part of that money back.
Part of that
So
money back.
It's just that bill or that legislation just got passed, so it makes it, I guess, worth taking that chance. Because in the past, agency would sponsor somebody, they no more graduate, especially down in the southeast part of the state. That they graduate, there were like 5 agencies offering them signing bonus at graduation to come and join some other agencies. So that legislation was enacted that I could have that individual sign a contract that they'd have to pay us back a portion of that, not the wages, because we have to pay their wages by their going to the academy as well. But part of that $8,772.
And does this, you essentially end up with an inexperienced police officer?
Correct. That would
What
be
kind of an additional load is that put on the team here to get him trained on the streets?
Correct. And these guys, I was speaking on Spencer's behalf because he's here. This is Spencer Bishop, but we have our interviews, and because we don't have a deputy chief or a sergeant, I allow everybody to come in to the interviews. Or I don't allow them, I ask them. And so Spencer came in, Tyler Hoff and Nick came in on their own times to do this interview. And the two individuals, both of them that I feel that we may potentially sponsor the academy are both legitimate people that I feel Spencer would agree that would fit into our organization. Would you agree with that?
I do, yes.
So one lives right here in town, up on the rents from the mayor, and so the other one lives over by Wolverine. Is a chance, but right now it's like,
Yeah.
it's hard. Everybody's having this problem, but law enforcement is really hit right now. And I called up the Northern to see if there's any recruits in their academy right now. And they have 30 recruits in their academy and everyone's sponsored by an agency. And the problem right now with this, especially with this assistance, I was just at the MCO's Michigan Commission of Law Enforcement Standards. Tim Burgoyce is our executive director. The problem they're having downstate is there's so many recruits being sponsored right now. There's not enough academies to have all the recruits that want to be sponsored. So, but as always, I'll do my best. I'm not saying this is like in the last paragraph. This is not necessarily a given, but based on the fact that I'm going on the academy route, but for our next council meeting, I have to have a decision whether I'm going to sponsor somebody or hire somebody. And I just want this to be an option.
Should have the option.
Yeah, it's good to have a second choice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So does anybody have any questions? So I'm not saying where this is the avenue I'm gonna go, but it's just, I need to have this option, if possible.
Just need a vote of hands or a
I think a
motion?
consensus is.
I would say, yeah, I mean, we're not voting a contractor or doing anything like that, so just give the chief the leeway to do his job.
All in favor?
Plan, do you?
Good job.
And hopefully not, but I put in here $5,000, like, that's what actually what it would possibly cost the city to our expense to sponsor that. And I would only do it as if I get approval to use that grant, that's $24,000 grant.
Well, I'll make that an official motion. All in favor, raise your hand.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks, chief.
And we're just, wow, I'll give Spencer kudos. I mean, he came here at the last minute from Grand Traverse, and like, I've explained the story before, but we're blessed to have the staff we have currently. And so hopefully we would be able to recruit another member.
Just so you know, Kyle, that $5,000 we gotta make up, you're not getting any new tires on your cars.
I stockpiled them there in the garage. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, city manager report. Thanks, chief. There is a boardwalk reopening party and ribbon cutting on Thursday, July 27th, 5 PM on Bluff Drive. So we're actually closing down that portion of Bluff Drive between Judd Hill and Spring Street. It's gonna be a little party up there, ribbon cutting, there'll be hot dogs, other snacks, maybe some music. So come join us for an official, yeah.
Unfortunately, won't be there.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
You made it happen.
The DDA hiring committee has so far now interviewed 3 candidates for the DDA director position. And they're gonna get together, decide whether or not to do second interviews or just to come back to the board with a recommendation to make an offer to somebody. So we'll hear more about that probably in August sometime. We are in our CIP, our capital improvements plan for 2024, the replacement of Judd Hill Wall is one of the CIP projects. The city's engineers prepared those bid documents and we plan to post that bid package soon, but I just wanted to inform council that our estimate from 4 years ago of it's gonna cost $200,000 to do this has kind of gone up to about $500,000 or a little bit more. But we do have plenty, and we will talk it over with Lucas and Nick, there's plenty of money between the two funds, the major street fund and the local street fund, which we have been saving up for a project, and that's where the funds would come from for this project. So it's, something that's been on the radar for a while, and we're going out to bid, and we will come back, just like with every other bid, council would select a bid if they want to select a bid, if it's not too high or. If it's,
And the bid package is available to view?
yeah, it's not yet, but it will be on the website. Yep. Finally, we are still working on the playground, the donation for the playground. I've asked attorneys, so they've, the Soren Bark Advocates has attorney working to create a donor agreement. So I've asked them whether or not they will have that agreement for review at the August 7th council meeting, because I would want council to review any agreement that has, if there's any specifics to that agreement. So that's
Do
going on
they,
there.
do they have a hard deadline?
Not specifically, no. It's kind of been like it's gonna happen soon, and we just haven't. So I think I've heard from council members that we want a deadline on this. So I've asked that they have some information for the council meeting to review on August 7th, because we also have to start ordering things, and we want to get this under wraps. This has been ongoing for about a year now, and we spend between staff, I don't want to say how many hundreds of hours we spent on this, more than we need to. So we want to get this wrapped up.
So if they don't do it,
That's up,
we're done.
that's up to council.
We don't do it, it's going in the grass and.
So they have expressed that they're donating to it. It's just they're working on getting a donors agreement. So
They've been working on this agreement for a while. And August 7th.
so I'll let them know that then council expects something by that meeting. There have been a couple of meetings. The July 12th Harbor Commission heard an update from the Ford Park Ad Hoc Committee, Harbor Commission created Ad Hoc Committee, just to start looking at to what improvements may need to happen at Ford Park for circulation, parking, and use. They're kind of looking at the uses there, seeing what works well, what doesn't work well. And the idea is after we hopefully late next year, get the harbor master addition, the building addition completed, then Harbor Commission can start looking at redesigning Ford Park as a project. So they're just working through that right now. It's all just ideas, but that's what the Harbor Commission discussed then. And also the zoning board on that same day approved a variance for a porch extension on Short Street, and then they tabled the decision for a Third Street variance request, which was a little more complicated. So they're gonna come back, I think it's July 26th at a 2 p.m. meeting instead of a typical 5:30 p.m. meeting. And I didn't have any significant meetings as I was gone for most of the time on maternity leave, so. That's all I have.
Any more old business?
I have one thing.
Okay.
I'd like to request that we put on the agenda for the next meeting, hopefully. I had a person stop at my house right before the 4th of July with a concern about Zoll Street Beach. There was a confrontation down there between the dog and a child, and some pretty angry people, and some things went on. I've also had some other people express some opinions about that. So I think maybe the best way to look at it is, what are our rules in town about dogs and leashes and how that's all handled? Because I know the chief has had some complaints, don't know how many, but he was kind enough to say before the next meeting, he'll kind of get some of that together for us. So that they have some tools to work with that are more specific too, because they've been having some trouble with it. So I'd just like to request that we take a look at that.
Good idea.
Yeah, before something happens. I just,
Yeah, because there's a lot of people
It
that
happens.
don't leash their
a
dogs.
lot of people and a lot of, there's, little kids getting knocked over. It's scary, not good stuff, so. That's all I have.
It's not leash.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That's a dog out there.
That's a minority back there, it's just like, there's a lot of dogs now.
Here, 2 leashes, 2 dogs, 2 leashes.
Later, but
Well, if there's nothing else, this meeting's adjourned.
I couldn't see the person